We come to the next section in our museum. It has to do with the largest ghetto in all of Europe, which was the Warsaw Ghetto. And on November 4th, 1939, the Gestapo ordered Adam Cherniakov, a public figure in Warsaw, to establish the Judenrat. Of 24 members, with him as a chairman, under his leadership, the Judenrat tried to balance the pressure of German demands and the effort to ease the worsening plight of the Jews. Due to the lack of resources and limited authority, the Judenrat's effort failed, and the situation in the ghetto became hopeless. On July 23, 1942, at the height of what was called Akcja, where tens of thousands of Jews were shipped from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka, 430,000 of them perishing at this camp, after being ordered to send yet another batch of Jews of the ghetto to the east, quote unquote, Cherniakov committed suicide with cyanide pills he had ready on the desk of his office. The office you see here depicted. Now, you know, most of the visuals we do know about the Holocaust, I have to tell you, have been all taken by the perpetrators. The perpetrators, the Germans, who had a very well-oiled machine of propaganda under the directorship of a genius public relationist by the name of Joseph Goebbels. And every image that came out of the propaganda office went through his scrutinizing eyes. So when we look, a lot of these photos that survived, they are what Goebbels wanted to show us. And he wants to show us here that the Judenrat, boy, he's giving the Jews the way to run their city. Look at the table he has. There are works of art on the walls, and he's consulting with his Judenrat, which was actually saying, how many Jews are we going to have to send to the death tomorrow? But this is the image we get. And we'll minimize this again. We'll do this. And I think we'll get this one on. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Anzeichen der jüdischen Zeit dann am Anfang des Ghetto, etwa des Inhalts Oboisten und Fagottisten darin gelöst, als hätte das Ghetto keine anderen Sorgen. Musiker spielten, weil sie nicht hungern durften, weil sie etwas verdienen durften. Die Menschen kamen hin, weil sie in dem Ghetto doch für etwa eine Stunde Entspannung oder zwei nicht wollten. Chaque fois, par l'économie touristique, voir les niemand kann, wenn man einen Studio hat.
Okay, so what you see that in the sternest moments of the ghetto, I'm still not getting it. Here we are. People were listening to music. I believe most of you have seen the movie The Pianist, Roman Polanski's unbelievable music, telling the annals of Art Spiegelman, who was the pianist, who was playing at the ghetto just like Reich-Ranitzky just told us, because music didn't cease in spite of the harsh conditions. Well, in the Stuka coffee shop, there wasn't only music, there was also an artist. His name is Roman Kramstik. Roman Kramstik was born in Warsaw to a middle-class family. Kramstik studied painting between 1903 and 1904 at the Fine Art Academy in Warsaw, and then in the studio of Adolf Herstein. He moved to Munich, where he enrolled in the Fine Art Academy, and in 1911 he exhibited in Paris at the Salon Ghetto, and exhibited his works in Berlin and Barcelona. His 1913 exhibition in Krakow was a great success. The following 10 years were punctuated by frequent travel between Poland with his wife. She was the sister of the painter Louis Marcoussis. He lived in Paris for 4 years when First World War broke out, returned to Poland, and then in 1932 moved back to Paris. He worked on paintings commissioned by industrialists and politicians while dividing his time between Paris and Poland. In 1939 August, his mother fell ill, living in Warsaw. Well, he's a nice, good Jewish son. He goes back to tend his sick mother. Comes September 1st, German invasion, Blitzkrieg, and he is in the Warsaw Ghetto. It's not related in the movie, but Art Spiegelman wrote a book on which the movie was based. And he speaks about one afternoon that he's playing at the Stuka coffee shop and comes by Roman Kramstik. And Art tells Roman, please come in, listen to some music, it will uplift your mood. And Roman said, you don't understand. We are all doomed to die. Art says, maybe that's the fact, please come in and listen to some music. And Roman refuses and goes back to his apartment. A few days later, Art Spiegelman relates that he heard the Gestapo came to the complex where Roman was living and asking all Jews to come down and be boarded on the trucks to be taken to Treblinka. He refused to come. The Gestapo soldier goes up the stairs and shoots Roman Kramstik to death. And Art Spiegelman writes a sentence, Roman Kramstik died the way he wanted, amongst his paintings. Now in a miraculous manner, you can see this portrayal of Adam Chernyakov. In his diary, which he wrote at the Warsaw Ghetto, and which is now housed at the Yad Vashem archive, he dots down, today Roman Kramstik came to draw my portrait. I look so old. And I want you to look at the difference between the meticulous drawing, where you can see that the person who is drawing Adam Chernyakov has the empathy of knowing what a heavy weight he's carrying on his shoulder, versus the photograph which I've shown you before. And this is what art is about, being personal, not taking a picture for the Führer. I'm moving to another ghetto. This time we are in Terezin, Czechoslovakia. In November 1941, the Nazis established a ghetto in Terezin, a fortress city in the northwestern Czech territory. In Terezin, they incarcerated the Jews of Bohemia and Moravia, elderly and privileged Jews from the Reich, and several thousand Dutch and Danish Jews. Under SS command, the ghetto served as a transit camp to the death camps. The Judenrat was responsible for the ghetto's internal life, and despite the harsh, overcrowded conditions, meager food rations, and forced labor, extensive educational and cultural activities thrived in the ghetto. By the time of its liberation in May 1945, more than 155,000 Jews had been deported to Terezin. 35,000 of them perished in the ghetto, and approximately 90,000 were deported to the death camps. Not many survived. I would like to read you the poem written by a young 14-year-old, multi-talented young Jewish boy who was incarcerated there by the name of Peter Ginz. How long it is since the last time I saw the sun setting behind Petrine, the Prague that my eyes kissed in tears when it cloaked itself in the evening shade. It's nearly a year since I've been rotting in this hideous hole. Instead of your beauty, I only have a few streets as a wild animal imprisoned in a cage. Peter Ginz was a young boy of 14 when he was incarcerated. By the time he was 14, he already wrote several books. He was an avid lover and admirer of Jules Verne, who allowed him to escape to other planets. When he came to Terezin, he was the editor of the youth magazine by the name of Vedem, which means in Czech, we lead. And he was active there, painting and writing for the paper. I think I have a quite special story to tell you about Peter Ginz. In 2003, the Israeli art astronaut by the name of Ilan Ramon was asked to join the Columbia mission. When he was about ready to go into air, he called Yad Vashem and said, "My mother and grandmother survived Auschwitz. Can you please give me something that I can take with me on my mission?" Well, the request also reached my desk at Yad Vashem, and I said, "Ilan, I have the best thing for you." And I produced before him a drawing that Peter Ginz did in Terezin, showing Mother Earth from the moon's landscape. And he named it Moon's Landscape. Ilan fell in love with the story of a young Jewish kid, 14 years old, before any NASA pictures were taken, knows how the landscape of moon looks like and how Mother Earth is there. And he took this drawing with him. It was February 1st, 2003. I was giving a lecture at Wellesley College. I was staying actually with a Scrantonian girlfriend by the name of Rachel née Harris from this town, Ruth Harris's daughter. And I was telling her before about Peter Ginz and Ilan because I was so happy that his painting will soar into the heights of the atmosphere and meet with his own vision. And she wakes me up in the morning. It was Sabbath, I remember it clearly. And she said, "Judith, you wouldn't believe what happened." Well, Columbia disintegrated in midair. And Ilan Ramon died in midair. And I was thinking to myself that we have two young Jewish personalities, as talented as they can get, and they never made it back to Earth because Peter Ginz too, in 1944, on a transport from Auschwitz from Terezin to Auschwitz, Mengele didn't think that he was worthy living, and he was sent to the gas chambers immediately. I was totally taken by that event because by that time I was so much with Ilan and Peter, and I'd called Peter Ginz's sister, who survived and lived in Israel. And I called her, Eva, crying and telling her how awful it happens. And she tells me, you don't understand. And I say, what do you, I don't understand like you, yours is it? She said, no, it's February 1st. And it was supposed to be Peter Ginz's 75th birthday. We do have a Yiddish expression which is beshert. Beshert means it's written in the skies. I think my story was written in the skies. I wish it would have been written to a better destiny, but it's still a story of Peter Ginz and Ilan Ramon. What am I doing wrong? Here we are. Come on, wake up. Why isn't it coming up? Okay, here's the picture of Peter Ginz and some of his renditions of the Terezin Ghetto. It looks like any other cityscape. He was avoiding painting anything which has to do with a harsh life and clinging to the beauty of nature and the surroundings, because this was the only way for him to keep on going. We already talked about the fact that historians say that art is not depicting the real thing, it's rather the documents. Well, Hitler had a grand idea. By now, the information about Auschwitz was filtering out. He didn't like the bad PR he was getting. He said, okay, let's make a movie and show the world how wonderful we are treating our Jews. And he commissioned a very well-known German film director by the name of Kurt Geron to direct a film in Theresienstadt and show how beautiful the city is. That meant that a week before that, 3,000 Jews had to be shipped out to Auschwitz because it was too crowded and wouldn't look that good in the movie. And the movie was made. Well, we knew we had to show that movie in our museum, and I said, okay, let's do a trick. The movie shows deception galore, while next to it, the screen is cut into half, and on the left side, you see the depictions that artists did clandestinely in the camp. And you tell me what is real and what is unreal. Come on, movie. I won't touch it, so maybe. funeral on the one side and a game on the other one. Okay. So again, my point of deception and truth, I did get it, and I will have to go a little bit farther. Auschwitz, the biggest death camp that was created by the Germans. 1.3 million Jews were murdered in Auschwitz. You've already heard several of my stories about people who reached this camp. Auschwitz was established as a concentration camp for enemies of the Nazis. First the Poles and later other nationalities as well. During 1942-44, the camp became the principal extermination center of European Jewry. Jews were sent to Birkenau in transports from all over Europe. Most were exterminated upon arrival. Only a few survived the selection and remained alive temporarily as camp inmates. In spring and summer 1944, the pace of transport and extermination quickened with a big deportation of Hungarian Jews. More than 1.2 million Jews were murdered at Auschwitz-Birkenau, as well as 70,000 Poles, 25,000 Roma, Gypsies, and approximately 15,000 Soviet prisoners. Well, some of you have probably visited the Washington U.S. Holocaust Museum. I've seen this model of the crematoria in its full. We have just taken a section of it, and there were big debates if we should have a model or not. And I would say in retrospect, in spite of me being against it, understand why patrons do need some real depiction and feel that really a building was created. Somebody was really planning the most hasty way to get rid of people. But that wasn't enough for me. I'm there to tell a personal story. And so what I added to display is this drawing by a Czech boy by the name of Juda Bakon. Juda Bakon was born in Prague. By the age of 14, sent to Terezin. 2 years in Terezin, together with Peter Ginz in the same room of youngsters. From there, sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. From 1942 to 44, he was assigned to what was called their Rollwagen. The Rollwagen meant you had a little wheel cart, and you just kept taking things from one end of the camp to the other. May it be bread, bodies, remains of bodies, whatever. Juda Bakon's father, with whom he was until the last moment, was not passing one of the selections in 10 in the evening in 1944. It was January. It's actually jotted on the painting on the side. And the day he was liberated, he painted this drawing. You can see the crematoria building on the bottom, exactly resembling the model which you have on the other side. But instead of the usual smoke coming out of the chimney, it's his looming father's face. Because he is a 16-year-old, knew exactly what's happening in the crematoria, and knew that at 10 p.m. at night, the smoke which emerged from that chimney were his father's ashes. As an artist, he put these two together and really lets us understand the smoke over Auschwitz in a whole new manner. And for every patron who comes to the museum, to view the mute model with some embedded humanity. In one of the sections, we deal with what Sandra has done years ago in her movie, A Courage to Care, We speak about those Gentiles who, in the midst of this destruction, did have something else in their mind. I would like to read you something which Lorenzo Perrone, a rescuer, Primo Levi, tells about in his book. I believe that it was really due to Lorenzo that I'm alive today, and not so much for his material aid as for his having constantly reminded me by his presence that there still exists a just world outside our own, something and someone still pure and whole, for which it was worth surviving. And Yehuda Bakon, when he comes out of the camp and he goes to Prague, he's an orphan and he lives with a man by the name of Przemysl, who gives the children another chance to trust humanity. And in this huge mural, it's a depiction of Yehuda Bakon's painting. You can see how he's being dragged out of Auschwitz. On the other end is the light of the land of Israel, where the sun is shining and the palm trees growing, and underneath he wrote, "To the man who restored my belief in human beings." We are at the entail of the Holocaust, the notorious death marches. Well, Germany is losing. It doesn't know what to do with its Jewish inmates. They have a sense that they're not going to catch the Jewish incarcerated people in the camps like they did on the Eastern Front in Majdanek, and they're marching them. They have no idea where to. It's January of 1945, the worst winter that Europe has experienced for years. And the Jews are marched for 200, 400, 800 miles long marches from Auschwitz, you name where you go. You know what? There are no photographs. You know why? Goebbels didn't order them anymore. It's the end of the war. Germany has lost. What is there to propagate? There are so many depictions of the death marches in memoirs because they were walking in the harsh of the winter, nothing but the prisoner's attire on them. Believe me, no coats, no shoes. And luckily enough again, this is where I triumphant was all over. The only depictions are by artists. And the one real depiction I have of a German artist by the name of Helmut Bachach-Barré, who carried in his pocket a very small, about this size, little paper diary. And he kept drawing on his death march. And yes, we took it in the museum and we blew it up because you don't need, as we know, a picture tells more than 1,000 words. We know what the death marches looked like. The perpetrator on the side, not allowing anyone to go slow, to stay behind, hitting them, shooting them galore, and actually only about 10% of the Jews which were sent out on these death marches made it out. Okay, we are at the end of the war, 1945, May 11th, the world is rejoicing. V-Day, confetti on Fifth Avenue, Paris, Berlin, you name it. But as the Jews phrased it, we were liberated, but not free. Jews were kept in what was called DP camps. You know what it means? Displaced persons. I know about displaced objects. I don't know about displaced persons. But there was no other name for them. There were Jews from all over Europe congregating in camps that were put together by the Allied forces. Actually, I have to tell you, Americans, that you haven't been so wonderful during that period. There was one American general by the name of Patton, unfortunately an anti-Semite, to the point that he put Jews and Nazis in the same camp. Who cares? The conditions were awful, sanitary conditions, no food, no nothing. If you really want to read a good book about it, there was an American Jewish GI by the name of Hilliard, and he wrote a little book named Surviving the Americans. I like to say this because everybody needs to know his role in history correctly. And it was so bad that Patton had to be called back, and there was a mission by Harrison who went to Europe and actually came back with a very bad report. And after that, Roosevelt did change the policy and conditions became better. Most Holocaust museums end on V-Day. I mean, what is there to do after that? World War II is over. Well, World War II is over, but for the Jews, it took another 5 years to be able to emigrate someplace. Most of the Jews in 1948 immigrated to Israel. A large part eventually reached the United States, and some of them went back to their Western countries, as you can imagine, going back to Poland, Lithuania, or other territories was simply impossible, as anti-Semitism still raged in these territories. Well, you know, what happened to Jews during the Holocaust for the survivors, we usually like to view them as somewhat by now heroes. They made it through it, and by now they have families, and they are good in their businesses, and boy, we have these strong survivors. I think we forget those who didn't make it as easily. And one of them is Etju Steinfeld. She was born in Poland, raised in Belgium, sent to Auschwitz, survived Auschwitz, but came out of it mentally ill. And one of her psychiatrists offered her to start painting and drawing. And this is one of her paintings, which is a self-portrait. No face, but I think the hands tell the entire story. I did not come out of hell intact. And we need to remember that too. At the end of the museum, we come to what I think is the heart of our museum. It's the Hall of Remembrance. The Hall of Remembrance is meant to remember each person by his name. And there was a wonderful French, actually born Romanian, by the name of Benjamin Fontaine. If anybody studies surrealist French poetry, he's one of the greatest. He was born in Romania, later joined a very active Jewish group in Zurich, which put together Dada. For a while, I was a director of the Yankut Dada Museum in Ein Hod in Israel. He was a friend of Tristan Tzara, whose name was Weinstock, and of Marcel Yanko and Benjamin Fontaine. It's not his real name. It's also a pseudonym which he took. Benjamin Fontaine had a Swiss wife, and when the war broke out, she told him, let's go to Switzerland. It's neutral. And he refused. He said, I'm here in France. I'll be protected by my friends. Well, he was not protected. In 1942, he was summoned to Drancy, and unfortunately, like the others, perished on the day of arrival. While preparing this lecture, you know, sometimes you have these wonderful things happening. I get on my table a catalog of an exhibition at this very moment at the Paris Jewish Museum, dedicated to Benjamin Fontaine. And in that catalog, I see this photograph taken by the American Man Ray, Emanuel Rozminski. And so we have these two Jews involved in Paris in the Surrealist movement. And I would like to read you a poem which we have inscribed on the Hall of Names by Benjamin Fontaine, which he wrote while incarcerated. Remember, I was innocent and just like you, mortal. I too had a face filled with rage and joy and compassion, simply a face of a human being. Benjamin Fontaine is holding his own head here in this photograph, and I cannot think of a better way of ending this lecture to you by saying, remember, each Jew had a face, had a name, and it's the story of these artists I've shared with you which amplify the message that yes, art indeed has a special way of telling history, maybe a more humane one. Thank you very much. I'll be willing to answer questions if there are any.
I was just going to ask you if you would do that.
Yes.
Any questions? Comments?
Yes. Yes, I am. I am. To tell you that part of my mission at Yad Vashem is also to be very much in contact with sculptors, artists worldwide who confront the annals of the Holocaust through modern eyes. And I tell everyone, if we weren't doing that, that means we have forgotten the annals. So yes, it's important for artists to keep dealing with it, confronting themselves and having others confronted via their art. Yes. Yes. Terezin is about, I would say, 60 miles northeast of Prague. It was a garrison built by the Austrian, during the Austrian-Hungarian. Yes.
I just want to say thank you. I've been a teacher for most of my life, and I've taught and went to many things about the Holocaust. It was profound, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you for coming to us. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much.
Well, I know that people are rushing off because they have to go on to the next event, but I want to, for all of you here, join you in thanking Judith for illuminating this very dark period of history. And I know that we all leave here enlightened and warmed by your approach to telling the story and giving art a chance. So thank you very much. It was brilliant. It was really brilliant.
Thank you.